There's been a sickening capitulation from the Albanese Labor government, caving in at the United Nations and voting to support the sovereignty of a Palestinian state. Let's bring in Dr. Bren Khalil, who's Director of Special Projects at the Australia and Israel and Jewish Affairs Council. Thanks for joining us again, Bren. This news must have come like a bolt out of the blue. The United Nations is forever considering resolutions and draft resolutions like these. Not so long ago, Australia would generally oppose them. Under Labor, we've started to abstain from them, but this time actually voted yes.
Yeah, it is a shame. These resolutions, what's remarkable about these particular resolutions is the consistency over many, many years of both Labor and coalition government. One of these resolutions that were voted on last night, both Labor and coalition have voted no since 2006, including the Albanese government, and one has been abstained from since 2011, again, including the Albanese government. So it really is a shame that the government has decided to vote yes for this. And if I may, one in particular, and that is the Palestinian sovereignty resolution, it's actually in direct contrast to the Australian government's position on the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. So it's odd that Australia would vote for it, and I can explain in 30 seconds. The text of the resolution negates any and all Israeli claims to the West Bank. Now, the Australian government's position is that Israeli and Palestinian territorial claims will be determined through negotiations. That's, of course, the same position as Israel and the Palestinians and the UN and the US and so on. So it's really unfortunate that the government has decided to vote for a resolution that is directly at odds with the Australian government's own position.
Yeah, when the boundary in the West Bank is always going to be an absolutely critical part of any negotiations for any two-state solution. So what has changed here? This is the big question. What has changed either in Australia or in the Middle East to see Australia's position change?
Well, look, there is always a shifts over time between coalition and Labor governments. A handful of resolutions get changed here, get changed there. Some of the more problematic resolutions, which have text such as the permanent sovereignty text, they don't get changed because of what the vote means. Now, of course, there is an entire library of anti-Israel UN votes, as you alluded to, and they all fit the same pattern, which is if Israel can be blamed for anything, then it will be, loudly and repeatedly, and the responsibility and culpability of any other party is studiously ignored. But some of the text and some of the resolutions are particularly problematic, and I think the permanent sovereignty resolution, the draft of which was voted for last night, is one of them. The good news is, go on.
Well, the point I was going to make is nothing prospective has changed on the ground. There's been nothing from the Palestinian Authority, from Fatah, from Hamas that has suggested that the Palestinians are in a better position to bargain and negotiate and run a separate state. I mean, it's all been the opposite. We've had terrorism, we've had war, we've had Hamas defiance, still holding hostages. So why on earth would Australia capitulate to what they think Hamas wants under those circumstances?
Look, I'll leave it to other people to determine the thinking of the Australian government, but certainly I can talk to the ramifications of it. I might add that these resolutions were passed in the second committee, and the second committee is mostly or largely focused on environmental issues, and so this resolution, the permanent sovereignty, was really about resources and the natural environment in the West Bank and Gaza and in the Golan Heights. But the resolution, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas had for decades been pouring raw sewerage into the West Bank and Gaza. But that, of course, is ignored by this resolution because they can't pin that on Israel. It's just a symptom of the UN and the dictatorial majority that really influences so much of the UN, and I might add weak-minded Western foreign policies that seek to appease rather than stick to principles.
Yeah, and overnight Australia has joined them. That's the development. It's such a worry. Thanks for joining us, Bren. I appreciate it. Dr. Bren Khalil there from the Australian Jewish Affairs Council.